All right, good afternoon. So I want to welcome everyone to this event, Using Data in Justice Reform. My name is Mark Howard. I'm a professor of government law here at Georgetown, and I'm also the director of the Prisons and Justice Initiative. And for those who don't know, the Prisons and Justice Initiative is a campus organization that focuses on combating mass incarceration. We run programs in prisons and jails, education programs. We just launched a bachelor's degree program at a prison in Patuxent, Maryland, where actually I spent the morning. And we have several reentry programs, the Pivot program and a paralegal program. We have what's called Making an Exoneree program, where we investigate wrongful convictions and have helped to exonerate 3 people from prison through the work of our students. And in many other ways, we have an active, engaged campus working with a student body that's incredibly mobilized, but unfortunately is on Easter break right now, and therefore we're missing their presence here today. But we're very excited to be welcoming several leaders in the fight against criminal injustice from the other Washington State. And they're here to share their work about the American Equity and Justice Group. I want to say that I first met Anthony Powers, who's the executive director of the group, virtually, and have had a number of conversations. We were put in touch actually by a former student of mine who's in Seattle, who's gotten connected with him and who thought right away that we would have a lot in common, that we would get along, and she was right. Unfortunately, as some of you know, Anthony has a medical issue now and can't be with us in person. I think he's joining virtually, but he's very much the godfather of this project and of this program today. So I want to acknowledge him and wish him well. We're in a moment right now where there's a lot of winds moving towards justice, although it's always a little bit tenuous. But we're seeing a lot of progress with support from different sides, different perspectives, different ideological backgrounds, pushing towards a more fair and just system against the previous 40 years of punitiveness, punishment, and incarceration. But it's very difficult to do, and what I think there are kind of 2 general approaches to this. One is focusing on human beings and stories and amazing people, and we have some of them in this room today. One who will be speaking, Vidal, who I just met. We have others who have been part of our programs. We got Ray Dodd working as a paralegal. We've got Josh, who's here as a paralegal, about to start working at Kirkland and Ellis. We've got Ty, who just had to step out for a second, who works as the director of reentry services for us, who spent over a quarter century in prison. And between all of them, I think we're at about a century total of time served. And so those stories are really powerful. But there's another dimension that's really, really important, and that I think doesn't, unfortunately, get as infused into the conversations, which is data, which is transparent data that people can access, because otherwise they're just individual stories, anecdotes, people that's hard to necessarily put together into this larger system. And that's what this project here provides. And I think it's so important. We all know and remember the case of the Stanford swimmer getting an unbelievably light sentence for a very serious violent sexual crime, and then countless other people having decades more sentence for something that is so much less severe and egregious. Yet that is how our system functions, where depending on where you are, depending on how you look, depending on which courtroom you go in, what judge is there, what time of day it is, there's evidence showing that if you appear shortly before lunch in front of a judge who's getting a little bit hangry, you're going to get a much tougher sentence than if you're going when the judge is in a good mood. And there are all kinds of variations and really disproportionality. And I think what everyone can agree on is that what we should have in a criminal legal system is fairness, is proportionality, where the punishment meets the severity of the crime, but also where wherever you are, that punishment would be pretty close. And in reality, and as we're going to learn in greater detail today, that's so far from being the case. Where you are, how you look, and of course, you can't underestimate the power of racial disparities in the criminal legal system. That's a centerpiece, and we're going to hear about it. So I'm so excited and honored that the American Equity and Justice Group is here with us at Georgetown to launch nationally their database, which is so important. So we have a great panel here, and we're excited about it. And I just want to welcome everyone again and look forward to the rest of the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And you're incredibly inspiring personally to me, just meeting you for the most part, just the incredible work that you do inside of institutions and prisons, providing education, empowerment, and equity to those most marginalized and most impacted by our criminal justice system. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I was born Vidal Vincent, but my community belovedly knows me as Blaze. I currently am a reentry navigator and paralegal at the Seattle Clemency Project, and I started there in mid-January. And a week before that, I was just released from prison after serving an 18-year sentence on a 30-year sentence. I was a juvenile tried as an adult at the age of 17. I'm just gonna cut to the chase. I hated that my guy Anthony's not here. Oh, you're here in spirit, brother. It's for you. Anthony, my brother Anthony, was also a juvenile tried as an adult at the age of 17. He was given a 77-year sentence after pleading guilty and taking responsibility for what they claimed that he did. When I met Anthony in 2009. I was 22 and he was 31 at the time. And we were in Toastmasters. And if anybody don't know what Toastmasters is, it's a public speaking and communication club. And it's not necessarily for in prison, it's Toastmasters International. We just so happen to have some local individuals sponsor a club on the inside where we were at. And he was vice president of education. He used to sit in the back and was real quiet. And you know, while I was working on my table topics and trying to get away from being super nervous and sweating profusely as I stood up and publicly speak, he pulled me to the side one day and he was like, hey, he said, how would you like to join this redemption project, self-awareness class? It's like it was secret. It was like some top secret stuff. I was like, all right, I'm in, right? To make a long story short, you know, the redemption project was a self-help program created by individuals on the inside, biased for us, and it was the mastermind of Anthony Powers. He originally created a self-awareness guide, and it eventually expanded into multiple branches, and it covered 5 particular areas. One, getting to know yourself, family ties, work ethic and responsibility, coping with incarceration, and reentry. It originally started with 19 of us in a group. It dwindled down to 12 as our final graduates for that first group. But within 5 years, the Redemption Project self-awareness class was in every prison in the state of Washington. There's been thousands of graduates. I had the honor of inaugurating the facilitators class in which we trained the first wave of facilitators to facilitate the classes and ultimately spread it throughout the state. You know, that was my first experience with Anthony about redeeming systems and transforming lives. And I honestly can say that I wouldn't be here standing and talking to you today if I didn't have that experience to be able to help build a program that Anthony Powers had masterminded. And once again, we're standing right now talking about a program that my brother Anthony Powers masterminded. And as I said, I was 17 when I was incarcerated and tried as an adult, and Anthony was as well. And like I said, he was 9 years my senior, but he always treated me as a peer and an equal, and he actually shortened my growth curve with the experiences that he had during incarceration to share that wisdom with me so that I can further along and excel and succeed. This racial equity this database, to make a long story short, is something I actually use in the particular advocacy work that I've done. I've clocked over like 4,000 hours in the law library when I was fighting for my case and fighting for my brother's case, and ultimately started fighting for other individuals' cases who were indigent and not able to afford adequate counsel and not able to get relief for meritorious claims. And there's been a network of jailhouse lawyers in there in which we tried to do our best to particularly get relief for people in the system. Ultimately, in my growth and development, in my odyssey, I vowed to myself one day that if I ever had the opportunity to find a kid that was 17 years old or 16 years old that was auto declined and tried as an adult, I would be there to intervene in that process. And sure enough, Before I even got out, I actually connected with the community-based organization known as Kids Are Kids, whose mission is to abolish auto decline. And we actually intervene with kids who are currently being tried as an adult, provide support for their families, give them advice on how the system works, directly engage their defense attorneys, directly engage the prosecutors, and really strive to change the outcomes and alter the outcomes of how it was when me and Anthony were tried as an adult and didn't have those resources to, fight back against the system. One of the things we use it in the community for this database is we put judges on notice that we know their track record as to how they sentence particular individuals racially. And one thing that this database does for me, because as we all know, everybody know ad nauseum, the differential justice, the racial inequities, the inequalities, blah, 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 blah. And I say that because I'm impacted. Statistics don't do nothing for me. But one thing it does for me is this database substantiates what I know anecdotally, empirically. And this is what I come and talk to prosecutors about. And this is what I come and talk to judges about when I advocate for individuals for resentencing to come back up, to have a fair shot, to have an opportunity to be more valuable to the community on the outside as they are inside, because they're very valuable members of society in general. And in closing, I would just like to say, I'm incredibly honored. I'm incredibly grateful. I'm incredibly blessed to be standing in front of you today. My early release date was originally supposed to be 2032, and it took a community effort. It took family, it took community, it took lawyers like Jeff Ellis to advocate for me pro bono to come through. It took community-based organizations to tell the judge that they have all the resources available for me to get out and succeed. I'm looking dapper. My brother picked this out. And to really just change the paradigm and change the narrative of individuals who are incarcerated. And one of the things we did at Redemption was we transformed the culture in there. We wanted to make a psychological, safe, healthy, nurturing environment in which everybody could grow. And this is the continuation of that work, is to provide transparency, provide acknowledgement, and provide accountability to what our system has been doing. And not only just quote statistics, but apply it to make real change. With that said, it's my honor to introduce the Executive Director of the Seattle Clemency Project, Ms. Jennifer Smith.
Good afternoon. It's such an honor to be here to celebrate Anthony Power's vision for a more transparent and just criminal justice system. My name is Jennifer Smith, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Seattle Clemency Project. The Seattle Clemency Project is a nonprofit in Washington state that matches people with life and long sentences and individuals who are facing deportation due to old criminal convictions with volunteer lawyers to seek a just outcome in light of their redemption. Seattle Clemency Project is fortunate to have Anthony Powers on our staff in a leadership position, and his vision and drive inform much of our work. Before I get into how the Seattle Clemency Project is going to use this incredible database tool, I want to talk a little bit about community engagement and what we've seen firsthand in the power of community engagement in the criminal legal system. I firmly believe that every single one of us, no matter what our occupation is, no matter what our place in society is, has the power to improve our criminal legal system by taking some action to contribute. This amazing database tool will only reach its potential if community engages and uses it to make a difference. The first example I'm going to use is the work of the Seattle Clemency Project and why we started it. Washington state abolished parole in 1984, and that left us with a system where hundreds and hundreds of people who are serving life and long sentence have no access to review and no right to a lawyer. The Seattle Clemency Project believed that we could engage the volunteer lawyer community to connect with people incarcerated, give them a voice, a meaningful chance at relief, and possibly the chance to win freedom. In just 6 years, we've engaged over 200 volunteer lawyers in Washington to provide direct representation to the prison population. 74 people with life and long sentences have won freedom, and 15 people deportation has been prevented in 15 cases. Only about 5% of our volunteer lawyers have experience in the criminal legal system. And when we started the project, many of them said to us, "Are you sure we can do this? Are we really qualified? We've never been in criminal court." And we assured them that in the clemency process, we're not back in court, and you have tools and skills as advocates that can be used to make a difference for people's lives. The life-altering impact our volunteers have had on our clients is a testament to the power that is generated when community members step out of their comfort zones and engage. The second example is related to the founding story of the American Justice and Equity Group. About a year after Anthony joined the Seattle Clemency Project in 2020, we had a training event with Microsoft to engage their lawyers and staff in our work. And our training session happened about a week after George Floyd was murdered. And so it was very clear to us that the first thing we needed to do before we got into any kind of training was just talk about racial injustice in the criminal legal system. And so we asked Anthony Powers and another one of our leaders, Carlton Daniel, to lead a discussion with Microsoft about their experiences in the criminal legal system and to answer any questions that the Microsoft team had. And in that meeting, Anthony shared one of his long-held dreams that a technology company would build a database tool that would make outcomes in the criminal legal system transparent for the whole community to see. And just like our volunteer lawyers at the Seattle Clemency Project, Microsoft stepped up to say, "We're not criminal defense experts. We don't do criminal law, but we do have talents and skills that can be applied to make this criminal legal system better." And so they jumped right in and said, "Anthony, we want to do a hackathon for your idea." And just 2 years later, here we are with a tool that will allow people to see for themselves the disparate impact the criminal legal system has on people of color, the excessively long sentences that have been imposed, and the disparate outcomes based on geography, and much more. This is the power of community engagement. Fortunately, there's increasing awareness about problems in the criminal legal system, but awareness and talk are not enough to create real change. We're all connected, and we must all take ownership of the criminal legal system that we created, all of us created, and can be improved by all of us. You do not need a special degree or a special place in society to engage. Everyone can do something. The Seattle Clemency Project will use this tool in a variety of ways, but the one example I'd like to give relates to a new law that was passed in Washington in 2020 that gives prosecutors the power to resentence individuals in the interest of justice. That law has been in effect for 2 years, and the number of times it's been used is extremely low. And that's a problem that we talk about a lot. But we also realize as advocates for the incarcerated population that we need to do more than just notice it's not being used. So we're going to use the database tool to print reports by county and share with prosecutors where their problem areas have been historically. And we're going to share that information with them, and we're going to ask that they take action steps to address these problems, so that they won't just look at their resentencing power based on an individual qualifying for this relief, but rather to address the problems that the criminal legal system has had in the past to bring justice. So there are many more ways we're going to use the tool, but I just want to say thank you for letting us speak today. Anthony, you are an incredible visionary and a powerful force, and I'm just absolutely thrilled and delighted to celebrate this incredible day with you. So thank you.
My name is Kim Gordon, and I have been a public defender, criminal defense lawyer for 27 years. And for 27 years, it has been my honor to stand with people at their darkest moments and to stand with them as they are entering the criminal justice system and a very uncertain future, a future that in many ways gives them no reason to have hope. And it was through my work a few years ago with the Seattle Clemency Project that I really got to experience the other side of it, standing with someone who has found hope in those darkest moments, who at a time when society takes everything from them and makes it as hard as possible for them to mature, to build a future, to become an individual, at that time, they have done that. They have defied society's expectations. And they've done so really on their own initiative. I was able to be with someone who, after more than 25 years of a life without parole sentence, he was released. And I'm so thrilled that he's a part of the community. My work with the Seattle Clemency Project brought me into contact with Jennifer Smith and Anthony Powers. And Anthony Powers calls me one day, and he says, look, Jennifer Smith gave me your name, and I have this idea. This is who I am, and this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to work on creating a database that makes criminal legal system data available. And would you be interested in being a legal advisor? And not only that, this was as the world was shutting down due to the pandemic. And I thought, great, this is a fantastic idea. Yes, I'm happy to be on board. But I also said, yeah, I'll do this, but here are all of the reasons it can't be done. And I'm thinking in my head, this is going to be a very small time commitment because it can't be done. And the reason I thought that it couldn't be done is because I was in my third term on the Sentencing Guidelines Commission. The Sentencing Guidelines Commission in Washington State is the administrative body that advises the legislature and the governor on criminal sentencing policy. In Washington State, if you are convicted of a felony crime, then we have a grid that really, based on your criminal history and the seriousness level of the offense that you are charged with, that grid gives the judge a sentencing range that the judge is bound to sentence you in, unless there are aggravating or mitigating factors or an enhancement. And as the Guidelines Commission, we oversee that grid. During all of our meetings at the Guidelines Commission, what I noticed is that so many of the policy decisions that we were making, decisions that were affecting people's lives, it was based on anecdote. It was based on who brought the scariest story, what news or what crime was in the media that day. It was not based on justice, and as a result, we weren't making decisions based on the effect that those decisions would have on the system as a whole. And it wasn't just me as the criminal defense lawyer on the Guidelines Commission that saw this. I was joined by judges, by prosecutors, by legislatures, and lots of other stakeholders in the system saying, we want to make decisions based on an understanding of data and not simply emotion. And we should have been the people that had the power to make this happen. And the people in that room are at the highest levels of the criminal justice system. And yet we'd have that conversation, express the desire, and then we would talk about the fact that Washington does not have a unified court system. We're made up of 39 different counties, and each one has its own court system. Each one keeps its own data. The Department of Corrections keeps its data. There are other administrative bodies that keep data, but those data systems, they don't talk to each other. And it's very hard to look at and to filter and search the data in one system alone, let alone compare apples to apples in the different data sets. And then we talk about the fact that, well, tech is scary. It's not what we know. And we're the government. We don't have any money, and we're stretched thin as it is, and we have other priorities. And we would go back to making decisions based on anecdote. So when Anthony contacted me, I was excited and I was pessimistic. So you can imagine my surprise when Anthony called me 4 days later and he said, Microsoft is on board and they're excited. This is now what is quickly turning into my second job. It's a volunteer position, but it is my second job. And the reason we are here today is we are building something in Washington State that I think is replicable throughout the United States. And I'm so excited to begin to share with you how we've done that and to hopefully start a conversation about how we can do that in other jurisdictions. Now, involving Microsoft has been key. Jennifer mentioned the hackathon. The hackathon is a yearly event at Microsoft that's sponsored by the company and is designed to pull together the creativity and the interests of all of their employees across the globe. For several days during a week, the employees are allowed to take time away from their regular jobs and are supported literally with food and tents and entertainment. Well, 24 hours a day, they work on a project. How can we use our talents and our expertise to make a difference in the world in a way that Microsoft is not? So when Microsoft got involved, we started with a hackathon project in 2020. What you're seeing on the screen is our initial volunteers. And there's 36 of them, if I counted right. These are people that are in marketing. They are attorneys. They are tech experts. And I have to say, there's one thing that the tech world didn't understand, and that is really how in the criminal legal system, we're in the dark ages technologically. And I gotta tell you what I didn't understand coming from the legal system. I didn't understand what's possible through technology. So when I would talk to the volunteers and I'd say, well, there's all of these different counties and their data doesn't talk to each other, they go, yeah, that's what we do. We're Microsoft. And when I said, we might want data points, and those data points live on judgment and sentence forms, and every county has their own fill-in-the-blank judgment and sentence form, and have you looked at the handwriting of lawyers or judges? Microsoft said, you know what, we're really excited to get involved and to work with our AI capabilities. So there really wasn't much that we could throw at them that they didn't say, bring it on. And I have to say that was something I've never experienced in my 27 years in the criminal legal system. Amongst the volunteers, and I'm going to call these individuals out specifically for two reasons. One, they were just working today on different things. These are people who have day jobs and also have this as their job. But they also bring very specific skills that are integral to what we're doing. A senior data analyst, a cloud solution architect, so an architect that works with data, and also a principal data scientist. This is someone who came from Nielsen and now works for Microsoft, and her expertise is taking data and statistics and making sure that the methodology that we use is valid. So the three of them have brought incredible talent so that the software developers, The legal system experts, the marketers, we are on point, and we are not oversharing what our tool can do. After the first hackathon project, and we saw the dashboard that we could create and that we're going to share with you today, we founded American Equity and Justice Group, and our nonprofit status is pending. Our mission as an organization is to use technology to uncover trends and identify structural change opportunities across the legal justice system, driving transparency and fairness for all, regardless of race, age, gender, or socioeconomic standing. This is the board for American Equity. We are members from throughout the criminal justice system, from throughout the tech system, from companies, not just Microsoft, but companies like Amazon and Intel, and legal system experts from organizations such as the Center for Court Innovation and Columbia Legal Services. We also have not just Anthony Powers, but others with lived experience. And we are working together to build what we are doing in Washington and scale up to a national level. Now, I want to tell you one other thing. I want to make an introduction to Kate Sigafus, who you're going to hear from in a moment. The other thing about American Equity, and you've heard some of this already today, is that we demonstrate the power of partnership and collaboration from unlikely areas. And Kate Sigafus is an employment attorney at Microsoft, but in her previous life, she was a prosecutor. So I would have tried cases against her had I been in her jurisdiction. And she is also a former pro tem judge. So you have a formerly incarcerated person, a defense lawyer, and a former prosecutor and judge that are heavily involved in bringing this together. So it's not just one side of the aisle that is pushing for data and seeing the value that data can add as we push for a better justice system. It's people from all sides of the aisle. Now, since Anthony can't be with us today, we're going to do the next best thing. And I am proud to share his story with you.
The criminal legal system is our legal system. Therefore, it should reflect our values. Unfortunately, as it stands right now, that is not the case. Data shows that there are vast disparities when it comes to race, age, gender, and socioeconomic status. The Equity Dashboard takes decades of information in the criminal legal system and puts it in one place and makes it transparent. What I like most about the dashboard is interactive. You'll see right now, like per the population, you're 5 times more likely to be arrested and convicted of a felony if you're Black. I read a stack of studies from colleges, government, and nonprofit organizations about disparities. Yeah, it made me wonder why big tech hasn't used modern technology to create a database to sort this data and actually overcome some of these disparities and help make for a fairer system. Nobody thought that it was possible. In 2020, I did a legal training for Microsoft. After this legal training, we had dozens of volunteers step forth to lend their talents to this cause. It changed my perspective of Microsoft. The heart and love they bring to it is just like, you know, they've gone above and beyond to make sure that this project is a success. One of the good things about this dashboard, it allows taxpayers to know how exactly their money is being spent. Policymakers can see it, judges can evaluate their own conduct. Over here, we have average sentence by race or judge. So this is where you can really hold judges accountable to see how they treat different races or genders or age. You know, I want to throw something in there, but you know, it's hard for them to continue doing what they're doing when light is shone on something. It's easy when people ain't paying attention, but when the light is shone on something, they're more motivated to take action. We have done presentations around the country, from Harvard University to state Supreme Courts to nonprofit organizations. At the end of every presentation, everybody asks us, how can we get this dashboard in our state? So that's why we need your help. We have functioned in the beginning phases off volunteers. But as we build things out and as we make things available for other states, we're gonna need to scale this up. We also need feedback from the public. We need feedback from people in the legal system to see what it is that we can do to make it easier to do these searches. I know that this dashboard can empower people. So moving forward, I want more people to get involved with it, more people to utilize it, and for us to come together as a collective to bring about the changes that need to be made.
I have a horrible job of following that video. It's like the worst job in the world. I am Kate Sigafoos. I am the mentioned employment lawyer that Kim mentioned at Microsoft. Also a former criminal prosecutor in Washington State. Also a former pro tem judge, which is just like a substitute teacher for their judges. That's all that. And so there's a couple things I want to talk to you about before we enter the tool. And one of them is something Kim mentioned, which is this slide here, which is the Washington State sentencing grid. So one thing to understand about criminal prosecution in Washington State is that a judge on the bench has this grid. All crimes have a specific seriousness level, and all individuals have some form of an offender score. If you have no criminal history, it's a 0. It adds up in various ways, there's a formula, but basically what happens is then a judge comes to this grid and this pop-out piece you'll see. Let's say your offender score was a 1, but the crime here, the seriousness level of it was a 15. Well, your range is 250 months to 300. It can go higher, it can go lower based on other factors, but this is the basics of the way we do things in Washington State. And this is the grid that allowed us to say, it's hard to say like, well, gosh, somebody got 3 months on this crime, but they got 250, but what's the impact on race or age or gender or any of those pieces, right? Because you're talking about vastly different crimes, vastly different numbers. So what our data team did for this project was to say, you know what, for every one of these boxes, we're gonna make it a percentage. So if it's the lowest number in that box, it's a 0%, and if it's the highest number, it's a 100%. And that way we're comparing, right? Something that's a little more similar to similar. All right, so let's get in this party. All right, so here you have our website. And as you saw in the video, I'll take you right to the dashboard. Feel free to go around and play on this all you want. And there's a few tabs. So the first tab is about proportionality. And as you can see, what proportionality is basically you would hope, I think Mark mentioned this at the beginning, right? You would hope that if the makeup of a given population was 20% white, 20% Latinx, 20% whatever, right? That the incarceration rate or the sentencing rate would kind of mirror that in some way, shape, or form. So what we've taken here is we have 20 years worth of adult felony sentencing data. So those are a lot of keywords, right? Which is, it's adult. It is felony, so we don't have misdemeanors, things like that in here. And it's sentencing only. We're actually in the works of getting a new big pile of data that's going to expand this to the front end a lot more, and we would love all the data we can get. But that's what we're looking at. And for this tab, we've layered that with the Washington census data. So just your average census population data. And when you compare those two things, this is sort of what you get. So this tool, you can sort by race, you can sort by year. So what we're looking at is just the year 2020. You can sort by county and also by gender. We have a heat map here, so you can zoom in and you can see what proportionality looks like for Black people in Washington State. We've got Native American in here as well. We've got white. One thing to note is that the Washington census data, Latinx is a very new category, so the data there doesn't quite line up the same way, but that's just one piece. We also have this ratio trend, which is over time. So the counties that are populated here are the 5 most populous counties in the state of Washington. You can select your 5 counties, you can pick and choose and make these change however you want and set them. But this dashed line, this light blue dotted line that runs through the middle, that's where you would hope everything would be if everything was 1, right? If one person, for every one person, there was one person incarcerated, that 1 is what you're shooting for in terms of like complete average. So what you see here is that we have race, we have white selected, and then this is the chart over time. So over the last 20 years, you can see sort of what, if anything, has happened. You also have the it broken out by gender as well. So the darker line is percentage of convictions, the lighter line is percentage of the population. So I mean, I can sort of hop in here and click on all sorts of different ways. Oh, that's flashing differently. And so, but you can scroll across the try to get that one to stay there. You can sort it down here as well by race. And then it breaks it out by county. And again, we're trying to be as transparent as possible with this data. So for things like, you can get down to the exact number of convictions, right? Like we're not trying to do some back-end math, like you can get in there and see all these pieces of cards for this tab. So if we go over, and just a few other points, the individual cost per year, that's based on the 2019, the most recent cost. So that doesn't fluctuate yet because we don't have some of the historical data we would need. So that's one of those pieces there. If we go to the next tab, all right, so now we've pulled out all that census data. That's all gone. This is just the sentencing data that we have so far. And this is where we can sort by county, by judge, and a variety of other factors. So if you're just looking at this page, over here in this box on the left is your average sentence range based on race and county. And so again, that 0% to 100, that's what we're talking about here. And then it's also by judge. These are currently sorted as, the judge who's had the highest number of cases all up. So Judge Warning, I think, sat on the bench for 24 years. He started their drug court program in that county he worked in and had lots and lots of cases. Just a few pieces to note here. You see a number in red. If anything's less than 20, we tabbed it in red, right? So a high percentage, you're not talking about a giant pile of cases, right? You're talking about a smaller number. So that's one of the little pieces we added to let people know what was going on. So again, you can sort by offense description. You can put in the name of a crime, county, judges, and then when you come over here, we've got the average sentence range based on judge. So there's all sorts of ways to do this. You can, if you want to sort it by sentencing percentage, right? You got people with some super high, like 213%. That seems really high, right? But this tool, and what we're trying to do here, we're not answering the question, right? We're not saying this person behaves this way. We're just trying to give the information so people can ask more questions. There's so much more digging that needs to be done in every one of these data pieces, and this is a start, right? You see 213, what I don't want somebody to do is walk away and be like, oh, that lady's horrible, right? No, that's not it. And what you look at is Judge Houghton, she's an appellate judge. She doesn't get a lot of cases where she's making a sentencing decision. She has a small number. And look at her numbers across the board, right? She was probably brought in for some really small reasons, and here's one case where her percentage is really high, right? We are just tired of people basing it on anecdote, right? Like this is what this is about. It's about getting down to the data so we can see all the ins and outs. If we get to this next tab, this is the proportionality, same information, right? Just shifted a little differently to see some different views. And so I talked earlier, you saw the chart with the seriousness level and the offender score. Over here, what we've done is we've sort of said, I have this loose theory that potentially, as the seriousness level of the crime gets more severe, it's accounted for in the grid, right? Like that's already accounted for. But as the seriousness level of the crime gets higher, do people on the bench have some level of like bias where they're like, you know what, but this is really bad, so I'm going to keep tipping higher and higher and higher, right? Like I would guess that would happen. And these flags in red are where it goes over 50%. And you can see that it does sort of match loosely, right? You get more and more red the higher it goes over to the higher seriousness level of the crime. So again, not saying this is what we do about it, but this is at least a place to start to know what's We've got some other data here broken out by age. You can sort all of these in a variety of ways. And again, the same timeline across the board. So then the last tab I want to show you, make sure we have time for Q&A and all that stuff, is the case drill down tab. And this is that one where like we really want to be as transparent as possible. And if there is that one case that's 1,000, 1,300%, you can find it in here. These do not link out to someone's personal documents, right? This just gives you a place where you could go then and look up the public records for them. But let's say I was a Kim Gordon, and a client walks into my door, and they have an offender score of 4, they have a residential burglary crime, 1 count, and they're just sitting in front of me, and they want to have some sort of expectation. You can at least see what's going to happen. So what I'm going to do here is I'll go in. They have 1 count of this, their offender score. I'll make it a 4 to a 4, and qualifications, enhancements, and exceptions. These are things like mitigating factors. So sometimes you'll see in a judgment sentence in Washington State, like, this is the range, but the victim was elderly. And so that means they're more susceptible. So a judge might go over the range. So what we're going to do is we're going to take out these. We're going to take out any sort of enhancements like a firearm enhancement, or if a victim was under 16 kind of a thing. We're going to take those out, and we're just going to get this to as basic as we can go. And then let's do, if I can type on camera, that's the hardest part of this job. And we're going to search. Okay, so here we are. We have 678 cases in the last 20 years that align with this, right? So at least now we've got this narrowed down. So somewhere in my head I can come up with something. And in looking at this, you would say, okay, here's population numbers. One thing when you do this that you might notice, these percentages actually look a little wonky to me, which is, yes, if you're African American, your average sentencing range is 20.5.6%, and that aligns with like this sort of level on the actual months. But what doesn't line up if you look at these is this Latinx number, because they have the lowest percentage sentence by range, but they have the highest sentence months. So that doesn't really make sense, right? Again, this is a place to start digging. We did this, we looked at it. There are individuals who get 0 months because they get something like a drug offender sentencing alternative, which gives them 0 months. So they're at the 0% mark, right? And their percentage is getting lower and lower. And so that's one number to understand. The other number is that you'll have a 0% if you're at the bottom of that range, so 15 months. It's also a 0%. So what this told us was, it looks like individuals who identify as Latinx are getting that 15 months, the bottom of the range. However, other people are getting much lower, much lower. So we looked into it, and maybe a theory is that Latinx people are getting drug offender sentencing alternatives as often, right? Again, we're not answering that question, but that's what this data does, and that's how it lets you dig around in it. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kim to talk a little bit more.
Thank you. And we're going to have some time for Q&A, and so we encourage questions about the dashboard as well. But one of the things that I want to point out, you may have seen, there's a couple things I want to point out. One is that there are a variety of different ways that you can use this dashboard. This dashboard isn't necessarily going to tell you, is someone racially biased or are they not? What we are starting with is the proposition that the actors in the criminal justice system are trying to do good. But we all may have unconscious bias, and that unconscious bias is hidden if we can only look at the one case that is in front of us. And we don't see how our decisions in one case really are, how they aggregate, what they look like systemically. And so by making this available to judges, to legislators, to policymakers, and to lawyers, we can begin to make what was unknown to them known. The other thing that you might have noticed in the demonstration that we just did is that there aren't always going to be huge disparities in the numbers. Sometimes when you're aggregating, you get small differences in the sentencing of the ratio, the percentage. It doesn't look like the system is really that harmful to the demographic that is sentenced at a higher percentage of the standard range than others. But when you begin to look at the numbers, you realize that even though the visualizations are pretty close to one another, there is a difference of weeks or months of an individual's life. And so to put that in perspective, I wanted to bring you this quote from Justice Sotomayor. This was in 2018 in a case where she wrote the majority opinion. And the quote is, "Any amount of actual jail time is significant and has exceptionally severe consequences for the incarcerated individual and for society, which bears the direct and indirect costs of incarceration. It's not just the dollars that we are spending keeping someone in custody, it is the lives that are affected by the loss of that person or community." And what we have shown you, what we have brought to you today is the impact that just a few of those individuals can make on their community when they are out amongst us instead of locked up. When we have presented this to throughout Washington State, we were expecting judges to be very unhappy. And what we found is largely it's quite the opposite. It's because judges also come to it the same way we assumed they were, with the best of intentions. But a judge sitting in one courtroom doesn't know what the judge in the next courtroom is doing, much less across the state, and again, how all of those decisions aggregate. So that is why judges have uniformly been telling us, this is going to help us as we prepare for our sentencings, and we want it on our computers now. This dashboard will help us discover what we may be doing right and what we may be doing that's problematic. The other thing that I think this gets at is the idea that there are some times where judges or other players in the system do get it right. But it's very easy to say without the data in front of you, I do it right all the time, because that is my intention. What we know is that you can't run from the data. You have to look at what you're doing when you're confronted with the numbers, instead of saying, disparity, that's the result of someone else's decisions, not my own. We've presented to legislators. They have said this is Roger Goodman, Representative Goodman, who is involved in a lot of the criminal justice policy work that we do in the state. This tool is important to help build a more equitable justice system. I'm really excited for this. And then this is my most exciting share. A little over a year ago in Washington State, our Supreme Court found that our felony drug possession statute, which had been in place for decades, it had been unconstitutional, and they struck it down. And with one decision, they invalidated not just thousands, but hundreds of thousands of convictions. And we hadn't expected that our database was going to be useful at this moment. But what we realized is when this decision happened, everyone was scrambling. We knew the impact of it, and we knew that so many people were affected, that judges, lawyers, legislators, we couldn't figure out who. Well, it took us working a couple days with our database to filter by the felony drug possession cases, to get a list of everyone that has been convicted of an impacted offense in Washington State. And we were able to break that down by counties and get it out to everyone so that they could begin to get their heads around how are we going to give relief to individuals. The other thing that happened is this law was struck down on what some may say is a legal technicality. But what the justices said in their decision is it is undisputable that the drug laws in Washington state are being enforced in a racially disparate way. So what we were able to show, we were able to put numbers on that conclusion by our justices. And the headline that you see here was one of the articles that resulted from when we shared our data. So again, individual counties couldn't say, not here, because we could show them exactly the degree to which it was happening in their county. I practice largely in Seattle, which is King County. And King County has a very progressive, they consider themselves very progressive, and I believe that that is their honest intent. King County does not fare well in our data. And so we're really thrilled that we can add this information to the conversation that's now occurring about how can we all do that. Since our work at the first hackathon, almost 2 years ago now, we have been selected by Microsoft as one of their 20 by 2022 open data collaborations. So we are one of 20 or so projects around the globe that Microsoft is partnering with to help us amplify and scale up our work. We have received pro bono assistance from firms such as Davis Wright Tremaine and Perkins Coie, and we are very excited to continue conversations with them. We've received fiscal and resource grants from Microsoft's Justice Reform Initiative, and we've been collaborating with their Chief Data Officer. We look forward to taking what we've done in Washington State and doing it elsewhere. And we're hoping by having this presentation today that we can start the conversation with you and your jurisdiction.